You're an American teacher living in a small Middle Eastern city for 2 years. You came here to teach English to refugee children through a non-profit organization. The pay is terrible, but the work feels meaningful and important for once. You share a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old concrete building. Your neighbors are kind, they invite you for tea and share homemade bread weekly. The children you teach are bright, curious, and desperate to learn a new language. You video call your parents every Sunday morning to tell them everything is fine. They worry constantly, but you assure them the conflict is far from this area. Your routine is simple. Wake up, teach, grade papers, cook simple meals, sleep peacefully. You've learned some Arabic, enough to buy groceries and joke with the shopkeeper. This morning starts like any other morning with the call to prayer echoing softly. You're making coffee in your tiny kitchen when the first explosion shakes the building. The windows rattle violently, and your coffee mug falls to the floor and shatters completely. You freeze, thinking maybe it's construction work or a car accident down the street. Then the second explosion hits much closer, and the entire building shakes violently again. You hear screaming from the street below and people running in every possible direction. You rush to the window and see black smoke rising just 3 blocks away. Military jets scream overhead so low you can feel the vibration in your chest. Your phone buzzes with emergency alerts in Arabic that you can barely understand properly. You try to call your NGO coordinator, but the call drops immediately without connecting. The building shakes again, and this time you hear the horrible sound of crumbling concrete. Your neighbor's door flies open and she's screaming something in Arabic while holding her baby. You don't understand the words, but you understand the terror in her wide, desperate eyes. You grab your phone, your passport, and your emergency cash from the kitchen drawer. You're heading toward the door when the loudest explosion yet tears through the neighborhood. The force throws you backward and you hit the wall hard enough to knock you down. Your ears are ringing so loud, you can't hear anything except a high-pitched, continuous tone. Dust fills the air so thick you can't see more than a few feet ahead. You crawl toward where you think the door should be, but everything looks completely different. The ceiling has partially collapsed and your furniture is scattered like broken toys everywhere. You find the doorway, but the door itself is blown off its hinges, completely gone. The hallway outside is filled with dust, smoke, and the smell of burning electrical wires. You can hear screaming coming from somewhere below, but it sounds distant and muffled strangely. You stumble down the stairs, coughing, your eyes burning from the thick, choking dust. On the 2nd floor, half the wall is just completely gone, open to the sky. You can see the street below, and it's chaos with people running and cars abandoned. You keep going down and reach the ground floor where the entrance is partially blocked. You squeeze through the gap and stumble out onto the street into complete mayhem. Buildings are on fire, cars are overturned, people are screaming and running in all directions. You look back at your building and see that the entire top floor is simply gone. Your apartment, everything you owned, just erased as if it never existed at all. You pat your pockets frantically and realize you don't have your passport or money. You must have dropped them when the explosion threw you against the wall hard. You're standing in the middle of a war zone with no identification and no money. A man grabs your arm and shouts something in Arabic, pointing urgently down the street. You don't understand, but you run with him because staying here feels like certain death. More explosions echo through the city, some close, some farther away in the distance. You see a tank rolling down the main street, soldiers in uniforms you don't recognize. People are being pulled from collapsed buildings, some moving, some completely still and silent. You duck into an alley as gunfire erupts somewhere very close, the sound deafening. Your heart is pounding so hard you think it might actually explode from your chest. You press yourself against a wall, trying to make yourself as small as possible. A family runs past you, the father carrying a small child covered in gray dust. You want to help, but you don't know how, and you're terrified of moving. The shooting stops, and you hear vehicles moving away, engines growing quieter in the distance. You peek around the corner and see the street is temporarily empty of soldiers. You run across the open space and dive into another alley on the opposite side. You find yourself in a courtyard behind a partially destroyed building that's still burning. 3 other people are huddled there, 2 women and an elderly man, all silent with shock. They look at you, and one woman gestures for you to get down low immediately. You crouch beside them, and for the first time you realize you're shaking uncontrollably. You don't know where the NGO office is from here. The city looks completely different. Everything is smoke, rubble, and the constant distant sound of explosions continuing without stopping. You check your phone, but there's no signal, just the emergency alert still flashing. The woman next to you is crying silently, tears making clean tracks through the dust. The old man is praying quietly, his lips moving, but no sound coming out clearly. You sit there for hours as the sun moves across the sky and the bombing continues. When darkness finally falls, the explosions don't stop. They just become harder to see. You realize you haven't eaten or drunk anything since your morning coffee that shattered. Your throat is raw from dust and smoke and breathing in the terrible burning air. The woman offers you a small piece of bread from her bag without saying anything. You take it gratefully and eat it slowly, trying not to think about what comes next. You're an American, trapped in a war zone with no passport, no money, and no plan. You don't even know who's fighting or why or when this nightmare will finally end. All you know is that you need to survive tonight and figure out tomorrow somehow. You close your eyes and try to remember what normal life felt like just this morning. But that life feels like it belonged to a completely different person in a different world. Now you're just another terrified person hiding in the rubble waiting for dawn to come. The woman beside you whispers something and points up at the stars visible through smoke. You look up and see them, the same stars you can see from home back in America. It's a small comfort, but it's something to hold on to in the middle of this hell. You pull your knees to your chest and wait for whatever comes next in this war. You wake up at dawn to the sound of crying somewhere very close by. Your body aches from sleeping on concrete and your mouth tastes like ash and dust. The woman and old man are still there, but one woman is gone now. You peek out from the courtyard and see the street is quiet for now. Smoke still rises from burning buildings, but the bombing has stopped temporarily at least. You need water desperately. Your throat feels like sandpaper scraping with every painful swallow. The old man gestures for you to follow him and starts walking slowly, carefully. You hesitate, but staying here alone feels worse, so you follow behind him quietly. He leads you through a maze of destroyed streets you don't recognize at all. Bodies are covered with sheets on the sidewalk and you force yourself not to look. You pass a small shop that's been looted, shelves empty, glass everywhere on ground. The old man finds a broken water pipe and cups his hands to drink carefully. You do the same. The water is dirty, but you're too thirsty to care anymore. Suddenly you hear a child screaming in pain from a nearby collapsed building's ruins. You stop and look toward the sound, your teacher instinct kicking in automatically strong. The old man shakes his head and gestures for you to keep moving away quickly. But you can't ignore a child's scream, you just can't walk away from it. You run toward the sound and find a little boy trapped under concrete rubble. His leg is twisted at a terrible angle and blood is pooling beneath him. You try to lift the concrete, but it's too heavy for you to move alone. The old man catches up and reluctantly helps you lift the debris off carefully together. The boy screams louder as you pull him free and you see bone through skin. You need to get him to a hospital immediately, or he'll die from bleeding. You ask the old man, "Hospital? Where?" using hand gestures desperately to communicate meaning. He points down the street and says a word you don't understand in Arabic. You pick up the boy as gently as possible and he cries out in agony. You start walking in the direction the old man pointed, carrying the injured, trembling child. The streets are filling with people now, some searching rubble, some just wandering dazed. You see other injured people, some being carried, some limping with makeshift bandages everywhere. You follow the flow of wounded people, hoping they're all heading to the hospital. After 20 minutes of walking, you see a large building with a red crescent symbol. The hospital is surrounded by people, hundreds of them, all waiting outside desperately seeking help. The entrance is chaos with doctors and nurses shouting orders in multiple different languages rapidly. You push through the crowd carrying the boy, his blood soaking your shirt completely. Inside, the hospital is overwhelmed with wounded people on every available surface possible here. The floors are covered with patients because there aren't enough beds for everyone injured. The smell of blood and disinfectant and unwashed bodies is overwhelming and makes you gag. You find a nurse and try to explain in broken Arabic that the boy needs help. She barely looks at you, just points to a corner where you should wait. You sit down with the boy, applying pressure to his leg wound like you saw on TV. He's crying for his mother in Arabic and you whisper, "It's okay," even though nothing is. Hours pass and nobody comes to help. The boy's crying gets weaker, and that terrifies you. You see a doctor rushing past and you grab his arm desperately to stop him. He turns and sees the boy, and his expression tells you everything without any words. He kneels down and examines the leg quickly, with experienced hands moving fast, efficiently. "American?" he asks suddenly, looking at you with suspicious, narrowed eyes searching your face. You nod, and he says something sharp in Arabic to the nurses standing nearby. They look at you differently now, some with anger, some with fear in their expressions. The doctor says, "You should not be here. Very dangerous for Americans right now here." "I'm just trying to help this child," you say, your voice shaking with exhaustion. "Everyone trying to help," he says bitterly. "But help makes things worse always every time." He calls a nurse and gives orders, and they take the boy away on a gurney. You try to follow, but the doctor blocks you with his arm across your chest. You stay away from children. People will think you a spy or something worse maybe. The accusation hits you like a punch to the stomach, leaving you breathless and confused. "I'm a teacher. I teach refugee children English. I'm not a spy at all." "You have papers, passport, work permit to prove what you say is true," he demands. Your stomach sinks because everything burned in your apartment when it was destroyed completely. "No, I lost everything when my building was hit in the bombing this morning." The doctor's expression hardens and he calls over 2 security guards immediately without hesitation. They grab your arms roughly and start pulling you toward the exit against your will. "Wait, please, I need help contacting the American embassy. Please just help me," you shout. The doctor turns away and disappears into the chaos of the hospital without looking back. The guards throw you out onto the street and tell you something harsh in Arabic. You understand the tone, if not the words. "Don't come back here ever again." You're alone on the street, covered in a child's blood, with no identification or help. You need to reach the American embassy, but you have no idea where it is. You stop a woman and ask, "American embassy?" But she just hurries away from you quickly. Everyone you ask either ignores you or looks at you with suspicion and fear now. Being American here is dangerous. The doctor was right about that, at least clearly, obviously. You find a quiet alley and sit down, trying to think clearly through the panic. Your phone still has no signal, and the battery is at 15% remaining only. You need a plan, but your mind is foggy from dehydration and shock and exhaustion. You remember your NGO coordinator mentioned a safe house once in casual past conversation lightly. You sit there as the sun climbs higher, and the heat becomes unbearable and oppressive. More jets fly overhead, and the bombing starts again, this time on the other side. You flinch with each explosion, even though they're not close to you right now, thankfully. A young man approaches you cautiously and asks in accented English, "You need help, maybe?" You look up at him, trying to decide if you can trust him or not. His eyes seem kind, but you've learned that kindness can be a mask hiding something else. "I need to get to the American embassy," you say carefully, watching his reaction. "Embassy is closed. All foreign embassy evacuated 3 days ago when fighting started here," he says. Your heart sinks because that was your only plan, your only hope of getting out. "There is evacuation point at the airport for foreign nationals," he continues explaining to you. "But very dangerous to get there. Many checkpoints. Soldiers asking questions constantly all the time." You look at him and make a decision because you have no other options left. "Can you help me get there, please?" you ask, hating how desperate you sound now. He looks at you for a long moment, considering something important silently in his mind. "Maybe," he finally says, "but it will cost you something in return for this help." You stare at the young man, trying to read his intentions in his expression clearly. "I don't have any money. I lost everything when my building was bombed," you explain. He nods slowly, as if he expected this answer, and thinks for a moment carefully. "You are English teacher, yes? I see your hands. You have pen marks everywhere." You look down at your hands and see the blue ink stains you never notice. "Yes, I teach English to refugee children at an NGO school here in the city. My sister needs to go to America. She needs English for university application forms now." You understand immediately what he wants in exchange for helping you reach the evacuation point. "If I help you reach airport, you help her with English. Teach her online later." It seems like a strange bargain in the middle of a war zone, but you nod. Yes, I promise. I'll help your sister with English as much as she needs. He extends his hand and you shake it, sealing a deal that might save your life. My name is Omar. We must leave now before the afternoon checkpoint shift changes soon. You follow him through back alleys, staying away from main streets where soldiers patrol constantly. The city looks worse in daylight, whole neighborhoods reduced to smoking piles of rubble everywhere. Omar moves quickly and confidently. Clearly, he knows these streets better than anyone else could. You reach a checkpoint where 3 armed soldiers stand blocking the road ahead completely there. Omar whispers to you urgently, "Say nothing. Let me talk. Do not speak English here ever." He approaches the soldiers and speaks in rapid Arabic, gesturing back towards you while explaining. The soldiers look at you with suspicion, and one of them demands something harshly loudly. Omar turns to you and says quietly, he wants your identification papers right now immediately. I don't have any. They burned when my apartment was destroyed in the bombing, you say. Omar translates, and the soldiers become more agitated, raising their voices at him angrily now. One soldier grabs your arm roughly and starts pulling you toward a small guardhouse nearby. You're shoved into the guardhouse where an officer sits behind a metal desk smoking cigarettes. He looks at you with cold, calculating eyes and asks something in Arabic you don't understand. You try to explain in English, but he cuts you off with an angry gesture immediately. He picks up a phone and makes a call, speaking quickly and glancing at you repeatedly. Finally, another man enters, older, wearing a different uniform with more insignia and medals visible. You are American, he states in perfect English, not asking but confirming what he knows. Yes, I'm a teacher. I work for an NGO teaching English to refugee children here. You have no passport, no papers, no proof of what you claim to be true. They were destroyed when my apartment building was hit in the bombing 2 days ago. He studies you carefully, trying to decide if you're telling the truth or lying to him. Many spies claim to be teachers, journalists, aid workers. It is a common cover story. I'm not a spy. I'm just a teacher trying to survive and get home safely. He pulls out a phone and shows you a photo of a bombed building destroyed completely. This is your building? He asks, watching your face closely for any reaction at all. You look at the photo and recognize your street, your building, or what's left of it. Yes, that's it. I lived on the 3rd floor in the corner apartment facing east. He makes a note and then asks you details about the neighborhood surrounding it completely. You describe the grocery store, the mosque, the small park, where children played every evening. He seems satisfied that you're telling the truth, but his expression doesn't soften at all noticeably. There is an evacuation flight tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. from the military airport section. You must be there by 5 a.m. for processing. If you miss it, no more flights. He writes something on a piece of paper and stamps it with an official-looking red seal. This will get you through checkpoints, but only until tomorrow morning. Then it is worthless. You take the paper carefully, afraid it might disintegrate in your shaking, trembling hands right now. He waves his hand dismissively and tells the guards to release you back outside immediately. You find Omar waiting nervously across the street, relief flooding his face when he sees you. You show him the paper and explain about the evacuation flight tomorrow morning at dawn. We must get you to the airport tonight. Stay there, too dangerous to travel at dawn. You walk for hours through destroyed neighborhoods, avoiding main roads and checkpoints when possible always. The airport is on the other side of the city, at least 10 kilometers away. Your feet are blistered and bleeding in your shoes, but you don't dare stop walking forward. As the sun sets, the bombing intensifies again, the sky lighting up with explosions constantly. You take shelter in a destroyed gas station while the worst of it passes overhead. Omar shares a piece of flatbread with you, and you eat it gratefully without speaking much. Why are you helping me? You finally ask him in the darkness between explosions echoing. Because you helped that boy at the hospital. I saw you carrying him through streets. You didn't know anyone had seen that. You thought you were alone in that moment. You don't know what to say, so you just put your hand on his shoulder gently. He nods once and then stands up, indicating it's time to move again, forward onward. You reach the airport perimeter as midnight approaches, exhausted beyond anything you've ever felt before. The airport is surrounded by military vehicles, soldiers, barbed wire, and massive concrete barriers everywhere. Omar leads you to a side gate where a guard checks your paper under flashlight carefully. The guard waves you through but stops Omar from entering with you through the gate. "Thank you for everything. I'll keep my promise about your sister. I swear it," you say. You shake his hand one last time and then walk through the gate alone into the compound. Inside, hundreds of people are waiting, mostly foreigners, all looking exhausted and traumatized like you. You find a spot against a wall and sit down, clutching your paper like a lifeline. You don't sleep, afraid that if you close your eyes, you'll miss some important announcement somehow. At 4 a.m., soldiers start organizing people into lines according to nationality and documentation status. You get in the American line with your paper and wait as they check everyone slowly. When it's your turn, the soldier looks at your paper and then calls his superior over. "This is a temporary emergency document. You still need to verify your identity somehow," he says. "I don't have anything. No passport, no driver's license, nothing survived the bombing," you explain desperately. "Do you have any photos on your phone, old emails, anything that proves you're American?" You pull out your phone with 2% battery remaining and scroll through your photos frantically. You find a photo of yourself with your parents in front of the Statue of Liberty. The officer examines it carefully and then asks you questions about American geography and culture randomly. You answer everything correctly, and he finally nods and stamps another paper for you to hold. Gate 3. Boarding starts at 5:30. Don't be late or you'll be left behind here. You walk to Gate 3 and see a military cargo plane on the tarmac outside waiting. At 5:30, they start boarding people, families first, then elderly, then everyone else remaining. You climb up the ramp into the cargo hold where people sit on benches along the walls. The plane is packed with people, all silent, all still processing what they've survived through together. The engines start, and the plane begins to taxi down the runway slowly at first, cautiously. You hold your breath as the plane accelerates, afraid something will stop it at the last second. Then you feel the wheels leave the ground and you're airborne, actually flying away from hell. People start crying, some from relief, some from grief, some from exhaustion, and everything combined. You look out the small window and see the city below, still burning, still at war. You think about the boy you carried to the hospital and wonder if he survived. You think about Omar and his sister and pray they'll find their own way out. You think about your students and feel guilty for leaving them behind in that nightmare. The plane climbs higher and the city becomes smaller and then disappears beneath the clouds completely. You're going home, but part of you will always be trapped in those streets forever now.